Are you constantly pouring into others but feeling empty yourself? It's time to revolutionize your approach to self care. Hello and welcome back. Today we're diving deep into self care, or what Deborah Fileta affectionately calls soul care. The term soul care might have you scratching your head a bit, but stick with me as we explore the path to living a full life. Prior to this episode, you've probably heard the term self care, but let's take it a step further. Let's talk about soul care. What if I told you that by nurturing your soul, you could transform your life and relationships? In this episode, we'll explore why so many of us struggle with feeling drained. We'll discuss how to identify the root causes of our emptiness. And we'll look at how to fill ourselves up so we can truly give to others. Whether you're feeling overwhelmed, guilty about taking time for yourself, or just curious about living a more fulfilled life, this episode is for you. Practicing soul care. Deborah begins this chapter with the following questions. 1. What fills you up? 2. How full do you feel in this moment? The answers to these questions paints a clear picture of what it looks like to practice what Deborah Fileta calls soul care. All right, let's talk about Madeline's story. Deborah Fileta starts this chapter with a few questions and then leads into a story about a client that she refers to as Madeline. Now, Madeline, just for context, Madeline is a woman in her 30s, feeling empty, stuck, and drained from always caring for other people. Deborah describes that through a series of sessions, they got to the root of why Madeline always takes on this role. In these sessions, they discovered some childhood patterns and beliefs. Now, one of these was that she was always trying to fix everything for her struggling parents who couldn't get along. They ultimately discovered that Madeline was still trying to fix everything for fear of being alone. Madeline ultimately realized her need for change from the inside out. All right, let's talk about the meaning of self-care. Just to frame our discussion, I went out and got 3 different definitions from different sources to help us better understand this topic. The first one, it comes from Very Well Health, and it says that self-care is the practice of taking care of physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual aspects of your life to promote health and wellness. The second one is from the National Institute of Mental Health, and they say that self-care is taking the time to do the things that help you live well and improve both your physical and mental health. The third one is from 2 authors, and it's Levin and Idler, and they say that self-care is defined as the activities that individuals undertake to improve or restore their own health. So now that we have a good foundation of the term self-care, let's dive into some of the topics Deborah talks about in the book. The first one is this term self-care. Now be honest with yourself. When I started talking about self-care, what was your first initial reaction? Was it positive or negative? Now, this answer is important because it could reveal some underlying beliefs about the term self-care. Many people subconsciously believe that self-care is being selfish. Next, Deborah talks about reframing the term self-care as what she calls soul care, or caring for yourself. The necessity of being full. Deborah begins this part of the chapter saying you cannot give what you don't have for yourself. At Overflow, we wholeheartedly agree with this statement, and I'll tell you why. Service is one of our core values. We believe that a central part of the healing process is in serving others. We also believe that we're not here merely for our own interests, but also to serve one another. We've seen that in helping other people in their journey with brain health, it often will take your focus off of your own issues. We also believe in service because we've seen how it provides a sense of purpose. It improves physical and brain health. It helps establish new relationships. It deepens one's faith, and it teaches valuable skills. You know, when people are praying for brain health issues to simply go away or praying for relief, they will often ask, a whole bunch of questions that are really difficult to answer. And while I would love to provide a simple answer that this is the 3 steps or the 3 reasons why God doesn't answer these prayers in these situations, I can't. What I can do is provide a quote by Craig Groeschel that directly speaks to these questions. And it says, "It's through helping others that God often heals you." So, when we say that we agree with that you cannot give what you don't have for yourself, it has a deeper meaning because we believe that it's through serving other people that you will often find healing for your brain health issues. And if you are running on empty, you will not have what you need to serve other people. And thus, this will inhibit your ability to find healing. Now, in the book, Deborah quotes the verse Matthew 22:39, and that's the love your neighbor as yourself verse. But I want to go a little bit deeper and look at a few verses before that. And that's Matthew 22:37 through 39 in the NLT. It says, "Jesus replied, 'You must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. A second is equally important. Love your neighbor as yourself.'" Now, Deborah goes into great detail talking about how in this text it could say, "Love your neighbor, not yourself," or a whole bunch of different variations. It specifically says, "Love your neighbor as yourself," meaning that we need to love ourselves. You know, if you look in the Bible and study the Bible and read passages and stories about Jesus, you will see that he also modeled soul care practices, and we'll dive into those here in a moment. I want to read a few quotes from Deborah because I believe they are very valuable in framing the end of this part of our discussion. She says that when you're caring for yourself, you're caring for your soul. And when you stop caring for yourselves, when we stop caring for ourselves, we become empty and you can't give to others what you don't have for yourself. Jesus' examples of soul care. The first one is setting boundaries and alone time, and this is in Luke 5:14 through 16. The next one was resting, and that is in Mark 6:30 through 32, and napping, Mark 4:38. Next would be nourishing his body, Matthew 11:19. Celebrating, Luke 22:7 through 8. Prioritizing friends, John 13:23. Prayer, Mark 1:35 and 6:46. So we can see just in these listed examples how Jesus was practicing soul care. And this was so that Jesus could be effective in his ministry. Living on fullness, not emptiness. Now, you may have heard the phrase living on E or living on empty. And I believe that's where Deborah is referring to when she's talking about living on fullness. You see, Jesus lived from God's fullness, not self-emptiness. Through those examples that provided in the previous section, you could see the practices that Jesus did to make sure that he was living on God's fullness. It's important as individuals that we take inventory of caring for ourselves. If we're struggling with practicing self-care or soul care, it's important that we understand why. We need to get to the roots of any underlying beliefs that are preventing us from practicing self-care. Verse for reflection. It's Matthew 22:37 through 39. I'll be reading from the New Living Translation. It says, "Jesus replied, 'You must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. A second is equally important. Love your neighbor as yourself.'" Let's review. We explored why so many of us feel drained, and this is for 2 reasons. A, many of us are living from the emptiness of self rather than from the fullness of God. B, we often struggle with practicing soul care. We also explored how to identify the root causes of our emptiness. We discuss looking for patterns and beliefs that are limiting our ability to practice self care, which is causing us to operate from the emptiness of self. Third, we explored how to fill ourselves up so we can give to others. We talked about how through serving other people, we'll often find the healing that we are searching for. In order to understand what fills us up, we look to two questions. We ask the question, what fills me up? And also, how full am I feeling in this moment? Now, if you struggle to practice self-care, I encourage you to go back and look at the examples of Jesus in the Bible.